way to Memphis, I heard someone mention time ain't been kind to them. Well, I know what you mean.
Welcome to the feed.
'Cause I've heard and I've seen more than one man should.
We're well on our way. SAP season has started. My daughter texted me last night. They picked up 80 gallons of SAP yesterday.
Oh, wow.
So it's running. Mud season is in full
Mud
swing.
season is running, yes it is.
All of the dirt roads are closed. You can't go on any dirt roads, so work with that. We're going to be talking about restorative justice and the Justice Center today, but first we have local events.
Local events, just reminding everybody that this is the night, the Shona Grill, not this is the night, sorry, this is the week. That Shona Grill is gonna have their pop-up at the American Legion. So Kim will be there with, I think she's gonna have bacon cheddar burgers, her famous Shona fries, maple mayo, starting at 5 o'clock, and she'll serve till she's sold out.
Great.
So that's at the American Legion. Also, if you're looking to do something Saturday night, the Westminster First Congregational Church is having a crock pot supper. It's a buffet, it's from 5 to 7. Adults are $10, children $5, and if you're under 5, you eat for free. And then just reminding everybody that this is the countdown to Chicago. Chicago starts next week. I have the inside scoop from the stage managers that it's going to be an amazing production. So if you haven't gotten your tickets, I really, really urge you to get them because I'm going to guess they're going to sell out.
We went online last weekend and the large blocks of the tickets are gone. You can pick your seats. There's still good seats left, but you really need to get there and be thinking about it because it's not like you like the first row of the balconies, the first and second row of the balcony. I think are gone.
I think by the time if you wait to get them. If you wait to hear how it was the first week and wait to go the second week and haven't pre-bought your tickets, I have a feeling it's going to sell out. So
I think you're right.
Out there.
Yep. Another public service announcement is the village meetings is coming up on May 20th. The village released their petition forms this week. So if you are interested in running for a position or you want to get something on the ballot, you need to do that. Go down and get a petition. You have to get, I think, 5% of the registered voters to get on the ballot, and you can see the village clerk about that. The deadline for petitions is April 4th. There are a village clerk position open, a president of the board open, and 2 positions open. So the meeting itself is going to be on May 20th. Voting will be May 21st, and get out there and do it. Be part of your community.
I'm going to go get a petition. I'm going to put your name on
No,
it.
you can't, because I am not a village person.
I'm going to go get signatures, and Mike is going to be the new village president.
No. That would be
You could be the
voter
first,
fraud.
You could be the first crossover from town of Rockingham to village president.
Thank you for your confidence.
You're welcome.
But anyway, but today we're here to talk about the Justice Center and restorative justice, and I want to introduce Jordan and Fabio. They were nice enough to get up this early and walk on their crutches and make their way in. So thank you for coming, guys.
Thank you so much for having us.
And why don't you tell us a little bit about the Justice Center?
Yeah, so we work at the Greater Falls Community Justice Center. It's a restorative justice center, so kind of trying to work on a parallel system to the criminal justice system, and really focusing on relationship building, community stepping up for issues, conflicts going on in their own community.
How did you get started in this?
We're both students at SIT, the School for International Training, in Brattleboro, and we were studying conflict transformation and peace building, and restorative justice was one of the things that we studied, and we got involved in different ways of looking at conflict and in looking for practicums and work that we could do in the community. We found out about the Justice Centers, and our director, Susie Belleci, also works at SIT, and brought us over.
Yeah.
Because restorative justice isn't a new concept, correct? It's actually ancient or an older concept.
Very much so. You'll find that within indigenous communities, this idea of restorative justice was very prevalent and very present. Today, there's been a modern interpretation of it, where it looks at, it mainly focused within the criminal justice system, but it has evolved into schools and other areas and community work. But specifically within the justice system, it's looking at how can we emphasize not broken rules or crimes done, but more so look at it through a relational lens and see what is the harm and impact of when things go wrong, when there's conflict, what is the harm and impact? And when we look at it through a relational lens, it's what was broken in the relationship and how can we fix that relationship instead of just, hey, you broke a rule and here's the punishment and we're gonna just hammer you with all the laws. But more so saying, sorry, my apologies, I'm getting over a little bit of a cold.
Yeah, we all are.
But really looking at how can we fix relationships within communities. And it gives voice to those who have done the harming, but specifically those who have been harmed. Yeah.
And don't you do isn't one of the things that part of restorative justice is it the circles? You have a circle?
We use a circle process is one of the biggest tools within restorative justice because circle process, also an ancient indigenous practice, specifically in Canada and Navajo tribes and Abenaki tribe in this region. And it facilitates a storytelling process, which pairs well with restorative justice. Because if there's a relationship, the only way you'll get to understanding harms done is hearing people's stories. So circle processes believes that if one person is speaking, everyone else in the circle is listening. And that's how we connect, through storytelling.
And probably for some people, that's the only time they get listened to.
Absolutely.
Yes. You'll find that, at least in our practice with circles, that it does offer opportunities for those who may not feel comfortable speaking or may feel that they can't speak in the normal instance, that in that scenario, they can. You know, and it's not this like magic stick that says, it's gonna happen. But if, with time, when the relationships build, you find the stories get deeper and you start really getting to the core of what really hurt someone in conflict.
And then so it then allows perhaps the healing process,
Yes.
which is probably, if someone is healed, they're probably less likely to reoffend. Do you find that there's less recidivism with, or is that still being studied?
I think it's still very much being studied. I've come across a couple articles that talks about the impact of restorative justice in recidivism. It's a little bit of a tough one because, we want to be able to quantify, like we need to quantify, but then there's also, things happen. People commit harms and, life happens and, you never know that you'll be there again in a week or a month or a couple years. But it has shown to impact recidivism and crime.
And you've been doing some unique work with, wheels.
Oh, social identity
Social
wheels.
identity wheels.
Yes.
I can't remember the exact name. And that's what's actually kind of the topic of what we're talking about today, because you're going to be hopefully presenting your work.
Yeah.
Yeah. So let's talk a little bit about that.
Yeah, so we do designing several trainings, and we have designed a training using a tool called the identity wheel, social identity wheel. And we're actually going to present our work at an international conference in Belgium in May.
Wow.
With the International Institute of Restorative Practices. So that's super exciting.
Yes.
And so we use this tool that is used in many social justice work called the social identity wheel, which is based on using yourself and looking at different aspects of what makes up yourself, identities that you identify with, and looking at that on how to look at how do you have empathy and compassion towards yourself, and how do you look at yourself in everything that we're constantly changing, we're constantly trying to figure out who we are, and judging ourselves, and sometimes we can be really hard on ourselves. And then how do we look at that and realize other people are doing that as well, and so how do we live in a world where we're kind of challenging ourselves, but also being compassionate towards ourselves as well as others.
You know, this tool, it's been used a lot in our work, more than just this one training that we've developed that we're presenting on. We've used variations of this social identity wheel because it allows an opportunity for folks to sit with themselves and a group of like-minded folks to sit with the question, what encompasses who I am? Mm-hmm. What are the pieces that make up Fabio or whoever else is engaging in this training? Mm-hmm. And that process is powerful. You know, to sit with what parts of myself are in conflict with each other, what parts of myself am I proud of, what parts of myself am I scared to share with other people. Mm-hmm. And the stories, again, the stories behind those is what makes it powerful. Mm-hmm. And as Jordan mentioned so eloquently, we believe that compassion and empathy with others starts with compassion and empathy with ourselves. Mm-hmm. That's the only way it'll happen first.
So is the tool graphic, or is it, I mean, why is it called the social identity wheel?
Great question, and it's funny because I need to draw it out.
Here's yeah.
I should have come prepared.
Yeah, that's okay.
So it's, I'll definitely try to hold it up to the camera. So it's an actual wheel, and social identity. Okay.
So it's drawn as like almost a web, but the reason it's a wheel is you kind of can think of things kind of moving and changing, with yourself at the center and your different identities around. And similar to spokes in a wheel, you can take them out and change them, and or they can be really strong and you can't change them. And so it's kind of to show. So Fabio's drawing.
Yeah. Are there classic identities?
So the one that we started with was the social identity wheel, which focuses specifically on social identifiers, you know, like gender, socioeconomic class, sexual orientation, where you grew up, how many siblings you have, do you have a partner, what you grew up with, if you grew up in a religious home, all these identifiers that are sometimes seen and sometimes not seen, race, and
some of them are chosen, some of them are things you're kind of born with,
happenstance or experiences you've had.
You know, a great example is, you know, I grew up in a Seventh-day Adventist home, you know, with strong Christian values. You know, as I grew up, and I knew that they were fairly formative to me. But certain parts of that upbringing, you know, as we all, when we step into our adulthood, we're like, how many pieces of what I grew up with I want to take with me into my adult life? You know, but those pillars still stand within us. So at times when we grow up, we say, well, all these are gone now, but sometimes they're still there. You know, those values are still there. So how can we sit with those values and decide what we want to do with them today? Yeah.
Interesting.
And you've been doing the work that you've been doing has been a lot with children, and trying to bridge the barriers of how kids communicate now, how they don't communicate. Let's put it that way. They don't communicate face to face. How they communicate more via texting. So can you speak a little bit about that?
Yeah, so we use this identity wheel and circle processes in a lot of the work we do. A big part of our job is working in schools. So using this with kids to kind of look at how they're so trying to figure out who they are. And looking at this, we consider this training as kind of a pre-training to our other training that is fully focused on social media and online platforms, as a way to look at having compassion and empathy, and then how do we transfer those ideas to how we act online. Because sometimes online, having a phone in between you and I makes it easier for people to be mean and not think of their actions and not think of what they're doing might hurt someone. So looking at how do we look at ourselves and our values and transfer that to how we act online, to either take a pause before we click send or look at the larger implications of our actions.
You know, our young folk today, they have a lot. They have a lot on their plate, and this social media gives us this instant platform, you know, of whatever happens, the world sees. You know, I grew up with the cell phones not being as fully capable of all those things. So like things that happened, I may have had maybe a day or two before everyone else knew what was going on. But in social media today, you think, you point, you shoot, it's everywhere. So it's a lot, especially when you layer that on top of young people still trying to find out who they are.
Yeah.
You know, so this wheel allows young people to say to their colleagues or their peers, hey, this is who I am today. It might change tomorrow. Don't hold me accountable. Just, you know, just love me through this process of me figuring out who I am, both in real life, face to face, and also online.
So so when you're doing the social identity wheel work and the kids are working in groups with real people, and they're kind of getting the idea that, okay, everyone else is kind of maybe going through what I'm going through, does it help, when you then apply it to the social media training, is your end game to make them understand that they are talking, just like in this group, they are talking to a real person. And if you wouldn't say it to them, to their face, would you text it to them? Is that kind of the how you're trying to approach that?
You've hit the nail right on the head. That is exactly the goal of these trainings, is for young people to realize that the impact of face-to-face is just as strong as the impact, or the other way, the impact of online engagement is just as strong as an impact of face-to-face, you know?
And is that what you're going to be speaking about in Belgium? Is that the training that you're presenting? And you're kind of ahead of the curve, right? Which is awesome. That's why we want to get it out to the community, because you need some funding, right?
We do need some funding. You know, we're interns at the Community Justice Center, and we love this community. You know, and this community has been great to us. So it would be great for us to be able to go on a global platform and talk about the work we've been doing in Vermont communities. That's important to us as a way of kind of giving back to the graciousness of this town, and bring back strategies, bring back restorative justice strategies that are working in other countries, and seeing how can it work here. You'll find that there's a lot of ties within rural communities. In rural communities, there's a lot of intersections. So it would be great to bring that stuff back.
And you have an event coming up, right?
Yes.
So we're having a fundraiser this Saturday, the 23rd at SAT. It's right off Exit 3 in Brattleboro. And we're having a soup and salad fundraiser. It's $10 a ticket. There will be soup, salad, bread, desserts. We'll also be having a raffle. There's a cash bar. We'll be having some live music. Fabio is an artist, and
Part of your wheel?
It's part of my wheel, yes. It's so part of my wheel, yes.
so he'll be performing. And yeah, all proceeds will go to funding our tickets, our transportation, the entrance to the conference. Because we really want to present what we're doing here in Bellows Falls, but also learn what is being done in the rest of the world, so we can bring it back here and strengthen our practices.
Very much so.
And what's the cost for the event?
The event is $10, yeah.
Okay.
And it's at the School of
And it's
International
at the
Training.
School for International Training, yeah.
Try not to use acronyms,
Yes.
because people go, what is
Yeah,
that?
School for International
School
Training.
for International
Yeah.
Training. It's in Brattleboro, off Exit 3. You can look it up. You can Google
Yes.
School for
You
International
can.
Training, and
Absolutely.
you'll actually
Online.
find it.
Yep.
So
Yeah,
I hope
we'd
you'll
love to
attend the
see.
event, and because this
It
is
is-
an amazing cause.
Yeah, thank you.
If people can't attend the event, is there another way they can donate? Do you have like a donation page?
Absolutely. We do have a link, and I
think
right
it
on
might
our
be.
flyer.
It's wait a
Yes.
second.
Yep, so the
May
link's
come up
right
here
at the
on
bottom. We also have it on our Facebook page as well as our website. So Greater Falls CJC, both on Facebook and our website if you would
Greater
search
Falls
that.
Community Justice Center? Yep.
Yes.
So One of the things that you, because the reason that I kind of am ahead of Mike on this is you guys
Yes,
came to
you
the
are
Rotary,
way
you
ahead.
came to the Rotary meeting a week ago, and that's how I knew a little bit about what you're doing. And so you spoke a little bit to the fact that Vermont is actually ahead of the curve with restorative justice, and that's interesting.
Yeah.
And is it just in southern Vermont? Is it through Vermont, or is it just Vermont in general?
I'd say Vermont in general. I may have the numbers a little bit off by a couple, but I believe that currently we have 20 or 21 community justice centers, and I believe Vermont has more community justice centers than the entire country.
Really?
So that
That's
speaks
interesting,
volumes
yeah.
to this Vermont model that's working here. Specifically working with, and I know that the Vermont model is specifically working with previously incarcerated folks, but it's still RJ focused. And each center, of course, is so unique in the services that they offer to their direct community. But yeah, I'd say Vermont is ahead of the game. There's other cities that have also been ahead of the game. We have the Bay Area in California. We have Chicago Public Schools that has rolled out a district-wide restorative justice practice. Minnesota also. I know that New York City recently, I heard of some restorative justice practices in schools district-wide being rolled out. But when you think of our model of community justice centers, Vermont is leading. And it's exciting to be in Vermont right now. It's a good time for restorative justice.
Just as an example, could you give us like what would happen to a specific person? Like how would they get in? What would identify them as being a person who you would work with restorative justice? And then what might be the action and then the outcome?
I believe it's everyone. I think community justice are centered for community members, so there's not a specific population.
But if they've somehow broken a rule or done something that's not. I mean, you said previously incarcerated people, but what does that mean?
So one of the things that we have at the Community Justice Center, Mike Malik, which was on he was on the show a couple weeks ago, talking about COSAs, Circles of Support and Accountability, and that's a big piece of our work.
Okay.
And reparative panels, Sami Abbas, who's our coordinator for restorative panels, and those specifically work with those who are transitioning. Mike works with those who are transitioning out of being incarcerated. So that population is a big part of the work we do. And then with reparative panels, we work with those who have committed the harms, but we also work with those who have been harmed. And that's where that community piece of it being for everyone, because these reparative panels and these COSAs can't be done without community involvement.
Right.
It's impossible to be done. So we need everyone. It is a all hands-on project type of thing. Yeah.
Okay.
It sounds like what your specific focus is more on primary prevention. If you're getting kids connected at an early age, learning, really identifying who they are, learning to, especially in this world of social media, learning to how to handle that. So you're working on maybe they won't go the path where they need restorative justice. So is that am I correct?
Yeah,
in that's more your
absolutely.
focus?
Our center kind of tries to work with the whole spectrum of before anything happens to after. And definitely the work we're doing in the schools does a lot of prevention before things kind of escalate. But we're also in the schools doing mediations, doing kind of after conflict happens, how do we resolve things, how do we become more resilient and stronger as a community.
There's a term being thrown around today called school to prison pipeline. Which basically says that a lot of the harsh rules of the criminal justice system is at times mirrored or followed with like no tolerance policies in schools, zero tolerance policies in schools that just like, you make the crime, you're out, you're suspended, you're this. So it has kind of, the term has been adopted, school to prison pipeline, because you'll find that those are mirrored. This zero tolerance with harm and impact.
I've heard that because resource officers are often law officers now, that is actually, when they intervene with a criminal charge instead of intervening with like, oh, let's de-escalate this whole thing, let's talk it out. So a lot more a lot of things that maybe when I was a young kid acting up, I may have ended up in jail, where instead of just having my parents say, no, that's not a good idea, Mike, you maybe want to think about that.
Yeah.
So when we think of our work of restorative justice in schools, it's dismantling that pipe. It's kind of like shifting it somewhere else, and as you mentioned, prevention work to keep our young kids. It's a known fact that most kids who are high offenders and suspended from school, that eventually down the road they will have some form of interaction with the criminal justice system, either in their youth or in their adult.
So this, introducing it at this level actually severs that action-reaction sort of paradigm.
Very much so.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
So we could probably go on, because we're in a really
I
good
know, you
conversation.
get,
Happens every
this
time
always
we
happens, I
work.
really
The
get into
timer
this
would
and
go
it's
off.
like,
We get a
okay.
good conversation. So if you're interested in the Community Justice Center, you're located at Parks Place. And if you're interested in helping fund Fabio and Jordan, please connect to their Facebook page. It's really good work they're doing, and we hope you would come back after the conference and tell us how
That's
it
right.
was.
Absolutely,
Would love
we'd love
to.
to.
Would love to.
Yeah.
Fabio has promised to come back and report on the conference dressed as a blue book.
There we go, we're holding to it.
It's on video.
Thank you, Bells Falls, and we'll see you
Thank you
next
so
week.
Thank you so much.
That's it, folks, for the feed. Be sure to catch us every Wednesdays at 7:30 a.m. Also, find us on Facebook at Fact TV, or tell us what you think. thefeed8@gmail.com. And don't forget to watch the feed online at www.fact8.com.